all these transformation requirements are going to be equally applicable to those license applications. And that is going to have a tremendously disruptive effect on the sector. Just as from a practical implementation point of view, it's very difficult to fathom how that's going to take place.
The Water and Sanitation Minister, Senzo Mchunu, has gazetted new proposed regulations licensing water rules. These would, for example, require successful licensees to have between 25 and 75% Black South African shareholding. Joining me to unpack these proposed regulations is Agri SA Legal and Policy Executive, Janse Rabie. Janse, thanks very much for your time with us on the CRA this week. Just to get your perspective on the sort of ins and outs of the regulations, what they would require in terms of implementation, and then we can get a bit into the possible ramifications thereof.
These draft licensing regulations published by the Department of Water and Sanitation are not unexpected. The sector has been asking for it. We know from our president that water use license applications take inordinately long amounts of time. And some of the features of the licensing regulations are not altogether unexpected and not unwanted, including the prescribed shortening of the period of licenses to 90 days. In practice, these license applications currently take up to 5 years and longer. So it's really trying to unblock certain things in it. Unfortunately, however, these draft regulations have also included, and it came as a surprise to all stakeholders concerned in the preparation of these draft regulations, they've also included specific features, including mandatory transformation requirements for licensees or applicants for water use licenses. And interestingly enough, also provisions with respect to minimum requirements for instance, shale gas, which came as a surprise to all of us.
Janse, in terms of the possible implications for the agricultural sector, I mean, we can talk about the wider economy, but we've got the context of where the agricultural sector contracted in the first quarter of this year. Obviously, various causes behind that. I think chiefly it's load shedding, but there are other issues as well. So the policy side, but also the sort of natural event side, as it were. If you've got that context of more pressure on farmers, more pressure on agricultural value chains, I think when we think agriculture, we think big landowners, farmers, but it's across value chains and supply chains. It's not just sort of, people in isolation sitting on these massive farms, surveying the land, as it were. The possible implications of these regulations, should they come to bear on the agricultural sector, what are your views on that?
So the majority of the regulations are not unwelcome. So we do have certain features that we're perfectly happy with. The transformation requirement, and it's a specific regulation or draft regulation that is included, seems to be primarily and almost exclusively aimed at commercial irrigation agricultural sector. So these raised quotas, if I can call it that, are specifically attached to the volume of water for which water use license is applied to. The only sectors that use these volumes of water are irrigation farmers. And then these just, without context, but 250,000 cubic meters of water up to 1 million cubic meters of water is a lot of water. Really only the commercial irrigation, agricultural, and potentially the mining sector that use those volumes. So interestingly also, and as an aside, the mining sector is excluded from these transformation requirements, which is extremely untoward in our view. So the effect of these regulations is really to transform and try to redress the purported racial imbalances with respect to water use allocations altogether. Now, if that is the case, that's going to have an enormously stifling and chilling effect on commercial agricultural expansion activities and investments. To add injury to insult, the Department of Water and Sanitation has also said, and this is a little bit more technical, but has said that a compulsory licensing is on the cards and have also included these in the draft regulations. Now, the commercial agricultural sector in South Africa, and irrigation sector in particular, use what are known as existing lawful water use entitlements. And they're not as clear as what one thinks it might be, but there is effectively registered water uses based on previous legislation that preceded the National Water Act. Now, if the department says that you're at some point, and that point is not in the too distant future, going to force you to convert that existing lawful water use entitlement to a water use license, all these transformation requirements are going to be equally applicable to those license applications. And that is going to have a tremendously disruptive effect on the sector. Just from a practical implementation point of view, it's very difficult to fathom how that's going to take place. Farming enterprises are very often held in very, as we know, flat organizational structures and very often in family business context. And simply transferring or shareholding to the tune of 25, 50 or 75% to a black shareholding partner is not going to be implementable and certainly not going to have the desired consequence, which I think the department is trying to achieve.
And Janse, this idea of supporting emerging black farmers, there have been various processes over the years, engagements from bodies like Agri SA, for example, to want to support those farmers, those who are enthusiastic to engage in the sector, to really come up, as it were, to progressively and sustainably transform the sector in a way that can be done, quite well, supporting farmers in that context. So instead of in this way, I think trying a cure-all, as these regulations might be sort of aimed at and trying to solve a very complex problem, I don't know if it really takes account of the bigger picture, where you've got farmers across the board having to deal with load shedding, for example, logistics issues. Maybe we should focus more of our efforts on solving those problems, point your time and resources at those issues. That would in turn, help farmers no matter what sort of station they might be coming from.
Chris, you're quite right, and there's a context involved that I think the Department of Water and Sanitation is losing sight of. Its job is to look at water and the management of our water resources. It shouldn't be trying to achieve societal changes by imposing demographic targets with respect to water use without taking into account the entire context. There are major problems that need to be confronted and confronted honestly. One of those is the fact that relying on a largely white commercial agricultural sector to ensure food security is not sustainable. And we all need to take note of that and make sure that those issues are addressed, but within the right context and in addressing the right issues. So for us, and this is part of your second part of your question, is that there are major things that need to be focused on, other than only trying to ensure redress of past purported racial imbalances with respect to water use in the country. We need to look at roads. We need to look at, as a major priority, the rural safety in the country. We need to look at our markets and we need to look at our infrastructure. And without that, I think most of what the Department of Water and Sanitation is trying to achieve is going to be false. I think we need to make sure that the sector is inclusive, certainly so, and make sure that the right plans and initiatives are on the table. This includes bringing in people of color, black South Africans, into the commercial agricultural fold in the right manner, with financing, with partnerships models that we propose. So we're certainly not blind and certainly not insensitive in our view, laudable objectives by government, including the Department of Water and Sanitation. But you need to take into account context and you need to prioritize what needs to be prioritized to make sure that the sector is viable and also an enabling environment that makes the cake bigger for all of us.
Thank you very much for watching. A reminder, please, before you leave, to like this video if you have not yet done so. We also invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Centre for Risk Analysis. Take care.